Welcome to Your Biz, Your Rules, the podcast for business-minded go-getters hosted by me, your favourite brain and biz coach, Daire Paddy. This is the spot for those of you ready to blend heart and head, woo and do, income and impact, change and chill, and so much more. So grab yourself a cuppa and let's get started. Today, I really want to speak to those of you who feel like you are still building those foundations, like you are still setting things up, like you are still creating your stability and the basics, the tenets of your business. Even if you've been doing this for ages, even if you have been in your business for years and years and years, somehow for some reason it still feels like you are almost starting fresh, not from total scratch, but it still feels like you are in those initiating phases of building rather than soaring. Now, this topic actually came up on a call that I had with my coach recently, because I've been feeling very trapped in this loop of not seeing much momentum. Like, I was showing up for my business, I was doing loads of work, but I just wasn't getting that traction that was moving me forward. And I was getting really frustrated by this. I am not a patient person, not by a long shot. And I was getting really frustrated by this sensation of still being at the start, of still building those foundations, of still figuring things out, despite the fact that I've been doing this thing for 6.5 years now. And she asked me, why do you think you're still building the foundations? What's wrong with the ones that you built when you first stepped into the business world? And the answer came to me straight away, and it was like this really clear message that just dropped into my mind. And the reason that I am still building these foundations is because everything has changed. Everything has changed since I first started my business. My direction has changed. Like, the direction of what I actually do has changed. When I started my business, I was leaving this corporate environment where I used to do marketing. So I used to do marketing for this global construction consultancy. And I had this issue with my boss. We had a, let's say, disagreement, and I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. So I handed my notice in immediately, and within a month I was gone. So I had to find something that I could really pick up very, very rapidly. So what I chose to do was to sidestep into doing marketing. It's what I was trained in, it's what I had experience in, it's something that I could do very, very easily without having to, retrain or anything like that. And so that's what I was doing when I started my business. But since then, things have evolved, things have changed. I no longer do done for you marketing for people. Yes, it's a part of the coaching that I do with people sometimes, but I definitely work in a more holistic realm of creating business success with my clients now, rather than, just telling them what kind of content to create. And so my direction has changed. And beyond that, the world has changed. The actual world that we live in has changed in the past 6.5 years. The most obvious thing to bring up here is the pandemonium. That seriously impacted the way that we all do business, the way that we work, the way that we structure our work days, the way that we prioritize. It has impacted the way that we and potential clients interact with and engage with businesses. It has impacted the way that people invest in businesses, as has things like the cost of living crisis and inflation that we've been dealing with recently. This all impacts business, and we have to be flexible, we have to be adaptable and work with it. We've also seen a real shift in awareness around things like racism, gender identity, disability, mental health, neurodivergence, trauma, privilege, and more. So many of these big themes that if you like step back, you're like, oh, but what's that got to do with business? Well, it actually has, because it has changed the way that we think about our marketing. It's changed the way that we use language. It's changed like basic things like how you would structure your elevator pitch and certain words that you might or might not use anymore. It has impacted the way that we might price certain things and create payment plans. It has impacted the actual content that we might put inside of our products and programs. The world that we are living with has changed, and on a very global scale. And these shifts have really pushed us to think about so many different elements of our business and make tweaks. But again, this is just an example of some of the shifts that we have experienced, which create this sense of, oh, like I'm still working on the foundations. Another thing to consider, especially if you work in sort of a service providing business or an online business kind of offer that you might have, or coaching or healing or anything like that, the industry has changed. Both that coaching industry and that general business to business industry. We have seen the full spectrum in the past 6 years, from toxic manosphere kind of coaching to toxic divine feminine coaching with a nice lashing of like pyramid scheme coaching somewhere in the middle. And a lot of people have wanted to really distance themselves from that world. And a lot of others, like me, have spent a lot of time and a lot of energy really trying not to be tarred by those same toxic bushes. And again, when that is something that has taken place, we do again have that feeling of, I'm laying the foundations, I'm re-educating people on what I do versus what they've seen elsewhere. And even though, you know, you are not new and you are not doing things for the first time, the conversations that you're having around the work that you do may feel like they are going back to basics, like you are readdressing those fundamentals. And then in terms of the business world, we've seen a whole load of trends rise and fall. We've seen trends in marketing. So things like webinars. Webinars were invented by somebody. They haven't always been here. And we've seen people, you know, go crazy for webinar launches and then not. And then we've seen the rise of like the challenge model. So we've seen people going crazy for creating challenges. We've seen people going crazy for creating like one-page PDF lead magnets. All of these things are trends. And often when you are very immersed in this world, you think that you have to jump on every one of them. And when you do, it again creates that sensation of you're laying the foundations. Because you are in that sphere, you are laying the foundations, you're doing something new, you're trying something new. We've also seen sort of a few different trends in terms of like product structures and business models. So things like memberships. We saw those become really, really popular, and then we saw people's attention shift to things like high ticket programs. We've seen people go all in on masterminds, and all of these different structures of businesses and different structures of products, again, have been very influenced by trends and what's popular. And when you dive into any of those trends, when you think, yes, that's what I want to do, that's what I want to play with, it does create that sense of building the foundations, because you, in essence, are spending your time and energy creating a product that will, in your mind, future-proof your business. And that's what it can feel like every time you start playing around with a new product structure or a new product idea. We've also seen shifts in things like scalability systems, so doing things like evergreen funnels, doing things like sales calls. All of these things have, you know, fluctuated in our time in business. And when you're learning to master any of these things, it does feel like going back to the start. And we also see shifts in priorities. And I think, again, this is very much influenced by a lot of the global shift that I mentioned previously. But we see people suddenly caring more about work-life balance than bringing in loads of clients, or the reverse. And when your priorities shift, it can feel like you're starting over. So many things can create this feeling. So many things. And when we're testing and trying a lot of these different things, whether it's, marketing, whether it is about scalability, whether it is about our actual business models and product design, some of us can spend a lot of time and a lot of money learning to master these different areas. And when we do that, we come to realize what we do and don't like, it's really helpful. It's really helpful to figure out what we do and don't like. And also what does and does not work for us, because, we all have different businesses, we all have different audiences, we all have different strengths. And it's really useful to play around with these things and figure out what works and what doesn't. But often what happens there is when you identify that something hasn't worked for you, the feeling or the thought in your mind is, oh my God, I'm having to start over, I'm having to start from scratch. And that's not actually accurate, because you have more awareness now, you have more understanding, you have more experience, you have more to share in your business. So I want you to stop seeing this idea of laying the foundations as being this sign of weakness, or this sign of failure, or this sign that you haven't made it yet, because actually we are always going to be building on the foundations. We are always going to be evolving alongside, our personal lives, our industry, the world at large. We are not designed to be static creatures. We can't build something once and then just have it out there, set it to forget it, and expect endless success to come our ways. That's just not the way this kind of work works, especially if you are wanting to create this sort of sustainable, sustained income and success, whatever your definition of success is. So beyond all of these things, so beyond, the direction of business changing, beyond the industry changing, beyond world changing, beyond trends changing, we change as human beings. And I know that I certainly have. There are so many areas in which I have experienced shifts since I started my business. So there are things like my relationship with my voice and my ability to get visible. When I first started my business, I could not even go on a Zoom call with a client that I already knew and have my camera on without getting the stress sweats. I could not post a selfie on Instagram. The first, I don't even know, year that I had an Instagram account, not one single picture of my face was on it. Not one. I just did not feel comfortable doing that. I did not feel comfortable being what I considered to be exposed on the internet. I didn't want to be seen in that way. And so obviously that is not the case anymore, because I'm here talking to you and I'm here consistently showing up in all kinds of different ways on all kinds of different platforms. And because that is the case, now the type of foundations that I'm building when it comes to my visibility are very, very different. Because back in the day, what I was really trying to build on was an ability to be seen at all. Now, my intention is something very different. So obviously I'm still laying the foundation of visibility, but now I am maybe learning to get more confident and creative playing with reels and short form video content. So the foundations, they shift. The things that you prioritize, they shift. Another way in which I've personally evolved is really releasing the need to be indispensable. So I'm not going to bore you now, but down to various pieces of childhood trauma, I had really developed this sense of needing to be needed and finding my self-worth and my value as a human being in the amount that I was needed and validated by other people. And that very much influenced the way that I did business at the start. So I got into some extremely unhealthy and codependent relationships with long-term clients because I just wanted to be needed by them. I wanted to be valued. I wanted to be indispensable. And so the initial foundations that I built for my business were very much enmeshed in that. And that is not the case anymore. I have released those needs. Like, yes, I still like to be liked. Who doesn't? I still like to feel like my clients need me and really get this massive impact from us working together. But it is not my entire self-worth wrapped up in that dynamic. And so the foundations in terms of, boundaries and client interactions has really shifted. And I think a big one for me was learning that a lot of my initial working practices were actually trauma responses. This was a really important lesson for me and definitely has encouraged me to revisit some of those foundations, because a lot of the habits and practices that I established very early on in my business, even though, they helped me be productive, they helped me be consistent, which I know are two things that everybody seems to want. I wasn't coming from this empowered place of, I'm in the right place doing the right thing. This is how I want to be spending my time. It was more this sense of like almost feeling like this is what I needed to survive. This is what I needed to be able to take care of myself. And since dismantling a lot of that very messy inner stuff, I've been forced to revisit the way that I structure my time, structure my energy, all of that stuff. So it is going to feel like I'm laying the foundations again, because I'm doing things in a different way than I used to. I think another thing that has really helped me is understanding myself more. I'm always banging on about self-awareness, and I'm not beating a dead horse there. It's really true. It is really true when I say that has given me such a gift, and it has forced me to take another look at some of those foundations. So I mentioned some of my working practices before and how they were very much rooted in trauma responses. Well, since discovering more about my own makeup as a human being, and in particular my human design, I have felt so much more empowered to let some of those practices go and adopt new ones that actually work for me. And human design specifically gave me a lot of guidance when it comes to figuring out what those things are, because I think it can be really tricky when you become aware that you are working and functioning in a way that just does not mesh with who you are. And so you're very aware what doesn't work, but you don't know what does. Like, you don't know what actually works until you've tried it. Whereas looking into human design, it gave me a place to start. So my human design type is a manifestor. So basically, like, working for other people, being told what to do, being expected to be in the same place at the same time every day doing the same things is like the kiss of death. And that is the dynamic that I had got myself into in the first couple of years of my business. In fact, maybe the first 4 years of my business. And when I started exploring human design, I realized actually I need to be able to follow my urges. When I get hit with an amazing new idea, I need to be able to just go and play, go and share that, tell people about that, keep them informed, get it out there really quickly. What I don't need to do is put it on the back burner, ignore it, repress it, and focus on doing things for other people instead. Or focus on prioritizing things that were part of an old plan. And so little things like this, I really have held close to me and tested them out. So I tested out a lot of these things that I learned through studying human design, and realized that, oh my God, yes, I'm not insane. I'm not lazy. I'm not bad at what I do. I was just trying to work in a way that didn't work for me. And with that understanding came again that sensation of okay, got to start over, got to create some new foundations, because those foundational practices that I had been implementing were damaging. They weren't supporting my growth. I'm trying to think of some other things that have really shifted for me and really forced me to, again, feel like I'm starting over, but in a good way. So one of the things is, layering up supportive habits and behaviors, like I've talked about those, because they slowly but surely do impact the way that you interact with yourself, with your business, with the world, with your audience, like with everything. And I also think experiencing a lot of hurt and a lot of healing in business and in life can feel like you're having that tower moment. It can feel like you are burning everything down and starting over. And it's actually very rarely the case. It's very rarely the case that you are actually starting over again, because you're still building on top of something that has come before. So even if that's just awareness, even if that's just experience, there is already a foundation there. So please never feel like you are doing something wrong for, like bringing things back down and continuing to build. That is part of this journey. Like, you will often hear that, what's that quote? Running a business is the biggest personal development journey you'll ever go on, or something like that. It is true, because every time you learn something new about yourself, about your work, about your purpose, about the world, you're forced to look at everything that's come before and make tweaks. So it feels like you're always building. It feels like you're always coming back to ground zero and starting over. And you're actually not. You are just sort of strengthening your base. You are strengthening your base, and you are future-proofing your path. And that is a massive power move in any kind of business. I just know that the breadth of my personal transformation since I started a business has been insane. And I'm convinced that every single person who hears me speak on this topic will be able to say the same. So with each of these shifts that I've mentioned today, it really, really, really can feel like that fresh start moment. Like in some area, we need to start over and we need to keep working on those foundations again and again and again and again. But I really just want to hammer home for you that this is not a sign of failure. This is a sign of progress. It is not a case of you're not successful yet because you're still working on the basics. It's more like you are incrementally carving out your own definition of success at a pace that is sustainable. Take that reframe with you and keep it in your back pocket for when you need it. I would love to hear your biggest takeaway from hearing me speak about this today. So please do feel free to share it with me, either in a comment or a DM, wherever you are most comfortable. Thank you for listening to Your Biz, Your Rules. I know that we all like to listen to podcasts, watch videos, read articles or books or posts on Facebook, and not really do anything with that information. So I want to challenge you right now. I want to challenge you to take something from this episode, anything, and use it to spark action. Use it to activate some kind of change in the way you work and the way you live. Do yourself this service today. And tell me all about it on Instagram. Hop over, shoot me a DM, or share an Instagram story showcasing what action you are taking thanks to this episode. And of course, do all of the usual things. Subscribe, leave a review, let me know how much you love the show, and I will be back with you next week.